Hello guys, were you expecting me from that side? No, today from that side. Hello everyone and welcome back to What Drives Us. I'm Jaume Soler again and this is the episode 2. I'm sure you have watched episode 1, but if you didn't, last time we talked about motivation, what it is, where it comes from and what people actually need to feel driven at work. We covered Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and self-determination theory. Remember it guys, SDT. If you haven't listened to episode 1 yet, I would definitely recommend it and going back and checking it our first, because a lot of people we talk about today builds on that. But today we are moving into something that I think is just as important, maybe even more important when it comes to the word workplace, and that's leadership. Because here's the thing, you can have the most motivation person in the world, but if they are being led by someone who doesn't know what they are doing, that motivation is going to disappear really fast. So today we are asking the question, what actually makes a great leader? It is something you are born with? It is a personal type? Or is it something you can learn? And most importantly, what does psychology tell us about how leaders impact the people around them? Let's get into it. So let's start with the basics. What actually is a leadership from a psychological perspective? A lot of people confuse being a manager with being a leader, but they are actually really different things. A manager is someone who oversees tasks, makes sure deadlines are met, and keeps things running smoothly. That's important, don't get me wrong. But a leader does something deeper. A leader influences how people think, feel, and behave. A leader makes people want to do their best work, not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to. And what distinction matters a lot in psychology, because when we study leadership, we are not just looking at what someone does, we are looking at the psychological impact they have on the people around them. Think about the best leader you have ever had in your life. Maybe it was a coach, a teacher, a boss, etc. What made them stand out? I would be willing to bet it wasn't just that they were good at their job. It was probably their way to make you feel. It was probably the way they made you feel. Maybe they believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, or no one believed in you. Maybe they pushed you to grow in ways you didn't expect to arrive. Maybe they just made you feel like you actually matter, that no one did before. That's the psychology of leadership. And research consistently shows the quality of leadership in a workplace directly affects how motivated employees are, how well they perform, and even how healthy they feel mentally. In other words, leaders have enormous power over the people they lead, and that power can either be used really well or really bad. So let's talk about what the research actually says about what makes a great leader. Okay, so when psychologists and researchers talk about a great leader, one style keeps coming up over and over again, and that's transformational leadership. So what's transformational leadership exactly? According to research, is a leadership style where the leader inspires and motivates their followers to go beyond their own self-interest for the good of the team or organization. In other words, a transformational leadership doesn't just tell you what to do. They make you care about what you are doing. They connect you personally and your personal goals to the bigger picture. And they make you believe that you are capable of more than you thought. Now, researchers have identified 4 key behaviors that transformational leaders typically show. The first one is idealized influence. This is basically where the leader becomes a role model. They walk the talk, their team respects and trusts them deeply, and they want to follow their example. The second one is inspirational motivation. This is where the leader communicates a clear and exciting vision of the future. They make the work feel meaningful. They are kind of person who can walk into a room and just light up with energy and purpose. And the third one is intellectual stimulation. This is where the leader encourages their team to think creatively, changing assumptions, and come up with new ideas. They don't just want people to follow orders, they want people to think. And the fourth is individualized consideration. This is where the leader pays attention to each person as an individual. They recognize that everyone on their team has different strengths, different needs, and different goals, and they adapt their approach accordingly. Now, there's why this matters so much from a psychological standpoint. Research by Khan and colleges published in 2020 found that transformational leadership has a significant positive relationship with intrinsic motivation. Remember intrinsic from the episode 1, that inner drive that makes you want to do something because you genuinely care about it. Transformational leadership actually activates that in people. They make their employees want to work, not just for a paycheck, but because they are actually believe in what they are doing and they actually like it. And the results speak for themselves. The same research found that employees under transformational leaders perform significantly better at work. They are more confident, more engaged, and more willing to go to extra mile. Think about some of the most iconic leaders in the business world. People like Steve Jobs at Apple or Satya Nadella at Microsoft. What made them stand out wasn't just their business skills, it was their ability to inspire people, to make their teams feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. That's transformational leadership in action. And there's something really interesting. According to research by Chu and colleges from 2022, transformational leadership doesn't just motivate people in general. They specifically activate intrinsic motivation by meeting their followers' psychological needs, their needs for growth, their needs for motivation and connection, and their needs to feel competent. Sound familiar? That connects directly back to self-determination theory, SDT, from the episode 1. Great leadership and motivation psychology are deeply linked. Okay, so we have talked about transformational leadership and how it impacts motivation and performance. But there's another concept that's deeply connected to great leadership that I really want to talk about, and that's emotional intelligence. Now, when most people think about what makes a great leader, they think about things like intelligence, experience, or strategically thinking. And yet, those things matter, but research increasingly shows that emotional intelligence, or called EEL, might actually be one of the most important qualities a leader can have. So, what is emotionally intelligence exactly? It is basically the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, and do recognize and respond to the emotion of others. It's about being self-aware, being empathetic, and being able to navigate social situations with skills and sensitivity. A major literary review by Coronado, Maldonado, and Benitez Marquez, published in 2023, looked at 104 peer-reviewed studies on emotional intelligence, leadership, and teams spanning over 2 decades of research. And their findings were really clear. Emotionally intelligent leaders consistently improve both the behavior and performance of the people they lead. They found a strong positive relationship between a leader's emotional competence and their team members' attitudes toward work. Think about what that means practically. A leader with emotional intelligence can walk into a tense situation and de-escalate it. They can notice when one of their team members is struggling, even if that person hasn't said anything. They can give feedback in a way that motivates rather than discourages. They create what researchers call a positive work climate, an environment where people feel safe, valued, and supported. And here's the connection back to motivation. When employees feel psychologically safe and emotionally supported by their leaders, they are way more likely to be intrinsically motivated. They are more creative, they take more initiative, they are more willing to collaborate and support their teammates. On the flip side, a leader with low emotional intelligence can do serious damage. They might dismiss people's feelings, create unnecessary conflict, or make their team feel like they are just a number. And as we will talk about in episode 3, that kind of environment is exactly where burnout starts to grow. So the takeaway here is simple. Being emotionally intelligent isn't just a nice personality trait. For leaders, it's a professional skills that directly impacts the people they lead and the results they get. So let's bring everything together for a second. We have talked about transformational leadership and emotional intelligence, but what's the common thread between both of them? It's this: great leaders activate intrinsic motivation in the people they lead. Research by Chu and colleagues from 2022 analyzed dozens of studies on leadership and intrinsic motivation and found that the leaders who are most effective at motivating their teams are the ones who support their employees' basic psychological needs. Their needs for autonomy, competence, and relentlessness. Sound familiar? That's the self-determination theory again, SDT. Empowering leaders share power with their team. They give people their freedom to do their work their own way. They invest in people's growth and development. And they build genuine relationships based on trust and respect. And the people is also true. Leaders who micromanage, who use fear or pressure to get results, who don't recognize their people's effort, those leaders destroy intrinsic motivation. They might get short-term results, but over time their teams disengage, performance drops, and people start looking for the exit. The bottom line: leadership style is one of the most powerful forces shaping motivation in any workplace. Choose the wrong style and you lose your best people. Choose the right one and you build a team that genuinely wants to show up and give their best every single day. Alright, let's do a quick recap of everything we covered today. We talked about the difference between a manager and a true leader, and why that distinction matters psychologically. We broke down transformational leadership, what is it, and the 4Ks behavior behind it, and how it directly activates intrinsic motivation and boosts performance. We explored emotional intelligence and why it might be the most underrated leadership skill out there, and we connected all of it back to self-determination theory, SDT, showing that the best leaders are the ones who meet their people's core psychological needs. Now here's the thing. Everything we have talked about so far paints a pretty positive picture, great motivation theories, inspiring leadership styles. But what happens when things go wrong? What happens when leaders fail their teams, when workplace ignore people's needs, and when the pressure just becomes too much? That's exactly what episode 3 is about. Next time we are talking about burnout, disengagement, and why millions of people are quietly giving up on their jobs every single year. It's one of the most important topics in workplace psychology right now, and honestly one of the most personal. So make sure you tune in for the episode 3 of What Drives Us. See you then!